Welcome to Basically MTG. I'm your host, Bad Kitty, and today I will be joined by Reptile and Synergistic to talk about, well, basically MTG. Don't forget to follow us on our socials to keep up with what we are posting and playing. All those links are in the description down below. In today's episode, we are covering what I think is one of the most important conversations to have when sitting down to play Magic the Gathering: Rule Zero. Now, Rule Zero is an unofficial rule that originates from the Commander format. But what is Rule Zero? Rule Zero is a conversation to set expectations for the playgroup, whether that's to change rules to fit the playstyle of the group, or to determine the power level and game length expected from the pod. So what does Rule Zero mean to you, Reptile?
Rule Zero to me is basically just establishing the way that this game of Commander is going to be played. So a lot of the times, like there's the traditional rules, like the set rules by the rules committee, but
Hmm.
a lot of the times you can break those rules to maybe make some decks a little bit more fair against one another. Or if you want to do different game modes, it really just allows you to customize it with the main rule set as a template. So that's what I mainly
Okay.
see Rule Zero as.
Okay. How about you, Synergistic?
Yeah, kind of to build up on what Reptile said, I think it's more of like the social contract that we as players engage when we're playing the game, especially more
Hmm.
specifically in Commander. Set of rules, house rules, anybody's rules that they want to agree on and play on. So everybody's at least on the same page and have expectations for the game they're about to play.
Okay. When should Rule Zero happen?
Uh, I think it should probably happen. Well, really,
Middle of
when
the
you
game,
sit
100%.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, there's one real. I guess you can always have them in the middle of the game. Where it's kind of like, okay, we didn't understand like that you're just in this. You have like a cedh deck, and we have precon. So
Yeah.
yeah, it does skew
So
it.
so so basically it should happen whenever you feel like the pod's not all on the same page.
Yeah, it's better to have it at the beginning, so you don't have to have it in the middle of the game. For the most part. Like
Yeah,
a
no,
lot of
Okay.
times, some people don't even really care, and that's a Rule Zero in of itself. Is just like anything goes. Like if your deck's better than mine, or if my deck's better than yours, I really don't care. Let's just play.
Right.
yeah, and that's kind of the beauty of cedh, right? Because cedh is literally anything goes, right? I do not care if you're playing stacks. I do not care if you're going to win by turn zero. Do not care if you're playing by, if you're going to win by turn one, right? Literally anything goes, which I often find those games to be easier to play than literally any other power level game. Because
Right.
I
It's
am
just
allowed
to
to
sit
do
down and
anything.
go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. How you touched on this a little bit, but how important is Rule Zero? Some people just really don't care. But some people, this is what is talked about before they pick the deck for the night. So how important to you guys is Rule Zero?
I would say overall, for the most part, personally for me, I mostly just play cedh. So the Rule
Hmm.
Zero is established, like
Hmm.
Synergistic said. But whenever I do every once in a while try to venture down into like the lower power levels where it's a lot more subjective because some people are rating them by numbers and I really don't know what the numbers mean. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was one time I went in with the Tatiova deck and I didn't read the room and everyone seemed like they were having a miserable time. But I thought it was,
Mm.
I thought it was a lower power level, so it's tough. I often have a difficult time gauging it, and cedh is kind of like a it's nice to just whenever you type in cedh, you know exactly what page everyone else is on. So
Right. Right. It follows the typical rules of what the EDH committee kind of decides, and then it goes from there on like what's the highest power decks and the highest power play lines, because the whole goal is to be competitive. So that is fair. Where in CDH, Rule Zero is not that important. What are some things like specifically to you guys when you sit down with like friends or something like that that you discuss in Rule Zero? Whether that's play styles or different like commander formats to like proxies or power level. What's something that like you make sure you touch every time, even like especially if there's a new player in your pod? Where do you like start that conversation and like make them aware of what kind of rules you have?
So I think that kind of varies if we're playing at a game store or like at a home, like a friend's home, right?
Hmm.
For example, when
Hmm.
we play in our play group in our one of our homes or whatever, we have like a mulligan rule that we use for, so people can actually play the game. Often at a game store, you probably can't do that because you're playing for packs or whatever, so you have to keep mulling down to whatever. Similar if you like miss lands or whatever. And I think same with the proxies. Our group, we don't care right now as much about proxies as we probably did in the past. But I know some stores, again, you really can't show up with a proxy deck because that's not gonna fly. Because stores are sometimes sponsors by Wizards of the Coast, so they need to, you need to have the actual game pieces to play the game. So I think it does vary like from place to place. Like if you're playing kitchen table, I think you literally have a conversation. Proxies are more often gonna be fine with most people as long as everybody's on the same page, which is hence rule 0. But if everyone's playing like a jank birds deck or dogs deck and you show up with a proxied Nagila deck, everyone's gonna be very upset at you for the rest of the night.
Yeah, it's not going to be a fun, welcoming experience for everybody at the table. Totally understand that. For me, some of the things that I like to cover within a Rule 0, especially with new people to the pod, is what is their expected experience? A lot of people forget to kind of cover that when sitting down in casual pods. Now, when you're talking cedh and like card store level and like tournament level, there's an obvious expected experience for players. Like you're there to win, you're there to play as powerful as possible. But in a casual setting, it's very important to have the conversation of, are you looking for a turn 2, turn 3 win? Or are you looking for this to go turn 10, turn 11? And where does it fall in between? What kind of things are you trying to avoid? Because if somebody's coming with just like a janky deck, like you said, and sitting down at a table full of people who have stacks decks or even precons, like it's just going to be extremely unbalanced. So like when you guys talk about expected experience, like how important is that for you guys? I understand that like you guys are mostly cedh players, but like do you feel it's as important in casual as well?
I think it is important in casual just because a lot of the times, like you said about a turn 2 or turn 3 win, or maybe even a turn 11. A lot of the times in casual, people aren't even looking to win. They're looking like that's where a lot of the group hug decks exist, and a lot of the ones where people lose, but they do something that kind of makes everyone else lose. Like there's an enchantment, something I can't remember it right now. Divine Intervention, it might be, where it essentially just draws the game. And some people like to just play that in casuals and just draw the game, and kind of the rules get bended a lot because the main objective is not to win anymore. So
Yeah, it's not to win as fast as possible or as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, and a lot of those strategies take time to set up, and they require resources. So if you're a really strong deck and you put the pressure on and you're able to win in those early turns, those decks don't even get close to executing what they want to do. So that's where that imbalance comes, where it's going to get really repetitive because those decks have no opportunity to compete or to even like get things started.
Something to kind of build up on that. I think some people, right? They don't want to play against certain kind of decks too, right? For example, if a casual player or somebody just doesn't want to play against stacks, right? So on the game 0 conversation, they will be like, "Hey man, I really don't want to be playing against stacks. I want my things to resolve," or like lands destruction, right? "Hey man, I don't want to be like, I want my lands to stay here. Please, don't destroy my lands." So it's also like what you want to face and don't want to face too on that night, which I guess it also goes with power level too. Like some strategies are stronger than others.
Right. So you're saying addressing what would be considered more toxic playstyles within a casual environment, basically.
Yeah, things that are not accepted more often than not with those kind of strategies.
They're more accepted in a competitive format because they are better there, but in a casual format, it makes the play experience almost unbearable.
Yeah, sometimes like people could be fine with somebody playing land destruction once, right? But then the next game comes along, they can ask like, "Hey man, next game, please, do something else or bring a different deck or whatever." Yeah, and that's also part of the Rule 0 conversation. Like, all right, we did whatever you wanted this game. Let's try a different kind of game, right?
Right.
I've even heard the argument of people are fine with land destruction as long as you win after.
Hmm.
If you
Yeah.
use land destruction as a win condition, as opposed to just using it if you're behind to slow the game down. And I think it goes back to just people. The more you restrict the people's ability to play their game and play their gameplay, the more likely they're not going to like it with things like stacks and land destruction because you can't cast your spells. It really just it takes away even the opportunity to get blown out because you don't have any actions and you're just in this repetitive loop of passing, drawing a card, and slowly building up, and then it just seems random because it's relying on top decks at that point.
Hmm. Okay. Do you think that you should have the rule zero conversation every time you sit down to play casual commander? Or is there a point in your play group where like you don't even consider having that anymore because you just assume everybody's on the same page? Like when do you think that the rule zero needs to be had again?
So I can only speak with an anecdote, and that's with our play group. I think, we didn't have as good of a, rule zero conversation, which led to like an arms race essentially, where we ended up at cedh at some point or another.
Right.
So we were, because somebody would bring a stronger card, then I would try to match them or go a little bit more, so that in return they would grab a stronger card, and then it's
Mhm.
like an endless arms race. So I think it could be important and not to get status quo, because people are always going to be updating their deck, making them more efficient, making them more stronger, in which that will also make them more competitive strategies. Unless you never update your decks and you kind of just like your deck as they are. What
Right.
I would go on the wager that most people try to like brew their decks and make them a little bit stronger every time they play against them. Like change a couple cards here and there, make them more efficient. Use new
Tune it.
cards that get released. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay.
And I'm sure most people even have a deck where it's their pet deck and they make it as strong and as efficient as they want it to be. And even if people don't really play cedh, they kind of have that one deck that's like, okay, this is my best deck. This is the most efficient one that I made. And it
Right.
could be a favorite. It could be something that's actually cedh too. So
Okay. Very fair. Good points all around. So the consensus here is that rule zero is important, mostly important in the casual formats, but it is important to also guarantee the happiness of the play group in the pod. So, do you have any closing thoughts on the situation?
I think also we've been talking about cedh almost essentially not having one, but I think with the time of this, with the newish Unfinity set, a
Hmm.
lot of players I've seen, even who are playing competitively, are just refuse to play some of the Unfinity cards that are legal because they introduce some weird mechanics that were never really in the game before. So even in cedh, I've seen some people, even if it's a good card, they'll refute playing that. So I
Yeah.
forgot about that. I think that's a good one to hit.
But to be fair though, like if somebody else in the cdh pod wants to play that card, right, they're more than welcome to play it, because it literally goes, even if you're putting stickers or whatever that Infinity card does, right? Like I guess
Mhm.
I've never seen someone be like, we're playing Infinity cards, get that out of here. You're not allowed to play that. At least on a
Yeah.
cdh pod.
It's more of like a personal rule
Yeah.
rather than something that you enforce on others. But like I have heard that a lot because it is a wide agreement that like there is Unfinity CEDH, or well, more of like Commander, and then there is just typical EDH and CEDH. Whereas there's always been a division, and now that they kind of blend together, a lot of people don't want that because the cards within the unsets are very unstable. I mean, that's the whole point of the card. They're broken. And it's supposed to be an outside format that was never supposed to be introduced into the competitive or casual formats. So I think that's a very good point to bring up, and like a talking point within Rule Zero.
Yeah, but I guess my thoughts on rules here. I think it's very important for lower powered level decks, whatever, like reptiles or whatever that means. Because I personally
Mhm.
think that 1 through 10 power level scales a bunch of trash. Doesn't really mean anything to anybody. Um,
Yeah.
Very subjective.
yeah, it's honestly, it literally could mean 20 different things to 20 different people. Um, but I think it's just important. You're always most If you're playing at home with your friends, I think it's easier to have that conversation with your friends, right? While in the stores, it might be a little more difficult, because especially if people are playing for money, because people are there to win. So I generally don't play casual commander at stores because there's always money involved or packs, and if I'm playing for packs and I'm trying to win, because
Right.
that's kind of what the intent of the game is. So I don't know, it varies a lot, but that's kind of my thoughts on it. I guess I don't know if what casual commander means when you're playing at a game store. Maybe when packs
Mhm.
aren't involved, you're just kind of playing for fun.
Right. Anything goes. I think that's where Rule Zero is probably the most important, is when you're sitting down with strangers at like a game store or a new pod. You kind of have to come to an understanding of where you all are at in terms of deck building, and how long you've been playing the game really does determine how well you can pilot a deck or how well you can build a deck. So even that, communicating that can like change how the gameplay is and how well people are able to enjoy the gameplay.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
and
not to hijack that conversation too much, but I guess I just thought about this. Like, what would you guys, if you're playing? It's not a CDH tournament, but it's a commander tournament. But there's money in the line. Would you bring your CDH deck, or would you bring like a purposely weaker deck? Um, I'm actually just curious what you guys think about that.
I would.
So go ahead, Reptile.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I would bring. I actually think I would bring my strongest one, just because it's kind of inherently just contradicts itself, where it would be casual, but it with the money and a prize on the line, and like implies that it's competitive, which is
Mhm.
what the C in the CDH stands for. So I think in general, if you put any kind of prize or something on the line, it automatically kind of turns into CDH, because CDH is really just, most, unless they're using a different ban list, of course. But if they're
Mhm.
using the traditional, CDH is just the rule set. So it's really easy to follow, and you're going to get consistency in a meta revolved around it. But what do you think, Bad Kitty?
For me personally, being, new to the competitive scene in terms of actually going to tournaments and things, it would entirely depend on how they ran the tournament, because going to our local tournaments, we found out that a recent rule was implemented in which they allow certain cards to be proxied so that the format can be more competitive, and so that people who own these cards don't have an advantage, basically a pay to win advantage. So they allowed those cards to be proxied so everybody has the access to them. And so in that case, it's a competitive tournament. I'm bringing my strongest deck. But if I were to go to a tournament where um they like don't have that proxy list, so most people are bringing the cards that they own, right? I don't think the power level is going to be as strong, so I would probably bring something that's not necessarily one of the top CEDH decks. I'd bring something to more that's like not necessarily unknown, but like a self brew, something that's not following all of the other CDH decks, but a couple cards, you know.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I understand you. What about you, Synergistic? What would you do in that situation?
I think I'm on the same boat as you, Reptile. If there is like, if there's a competitiveness to it, there's a prize, right? I think I would do myself a disservice, and like I think anybody playing in the tournament too, not to show them my best, right? Whatever that
Hmm.
means. Um,
That's fair.
so
Yeah.
I don't know. I view it from that. I've been a modern player for like 7 years, so like it's all about competitive and building the best deck and whatever. So
Right.
I guess I come from it from that approach. But I'm honestly interested. I was actually talking to somebody at a game store, not too long ago, and they went to like casual commander nights, and they bring their CDH deck and they win every prize money because everyone's just there playing casual commander. But I presume the people there are not having fun. So I struggle with that too, right? Because I wouldn't want like
Hmm.
you know crap on like somebody playing birds with a Nagila deck or whatever. Um, so I don't know. It's hard. We don't have the answers to it. It's just a good thought experiment, something to think and ponder about. Um,
That definitely, yeah. That reminds me a lot of personally. We all really kind of started Commander up together, and like Synergistic said, we didn't really have the Real Zero conversation, so we had an arms race. But before that arms race, whenever we really got to just experiment with so many cards, it was a different environment because we weren't aware of all the best strategies and the best cards. It was more of just trying to make our commanders the best, and
Mhm.
that was that was a time where I had the most fun, or one of the times that I had the most fun in Commander was,
Mhm.
really figuring out new cards for Azuri, and everything was pretty cheap, so it was easy to add. It was just those. It was a fun time that eventually got pushed out and that really can't come back unless you specifically curate it. So, yeah, I get what you mean. To be kind of like ruining the party when everyone is at a similar level playing birds against wolves. But if I play Kinnan, no one stands a chance. So, yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah, and I keep mentioning Najila because I got destroyed by a couple Najila decks when I went. So just
Yeah,
as an
I've heard nothing but the Gilas so far.
Yeah, it's like I'm having like PTSD from Najila.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you guys want to add to the conversation in terms of Rule Zero, its importance, anything like that, or you think we've kind of covered our bases?
I guess I'll go ahead, Synergistic.
From my perspective, I think we've kind of talked. You can talk about Rule Zero or Magic for days and days and days.
Yeah.
I think it just
Yeah.
kind of varies. Like it kind of branches. That's kind of the basics from my perspective of kind of Rule Zero. Or, I'm sure there's more ways to think about it or talk about it. That's how at least I engage it.
Yeah, I think a good example is MTG Arena when they added alchemy. Many people do not like that, and they would prefer to have that out, but you don't have the possibility of doing that. So
Oh yeah.
the Rule Zero, if there was a way to change it and to have it not affect other Eternal formats like Historic and Historic Brawl, things like that, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would want to, but they don't have that option, and a lot of people
Mhm.
leave because of that. So it turns people off, and the ability to not customize it at least to how you want to play, it shows there. So I think it is important.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for sitting down and having this conversation with me. For those who are listening, thank you for listening to us. And don't forget to follow us on our socials. All of that's posted down below in the description. And we'll see you next time.
Stay basic, everybody.
I started that, goddamn it.